Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. You ready to dive into a dark one today?
Always.
Today, we're looking into Carl Eugene Watts. This guy, he's suspected of being like one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history.
Wow.
And that's not an exaggeration. Some say he had like 15 victims.
Okay.
Others say over 100.
Yeah.
That's a huge range.
It is.
So our mission is to figure out, one, why isn't his name as well known as other serial killers? And two, what made this guy tick?
I mean, it is kind of fascinating how someone can just vanish into the shadows, even with that kind of trail of crimes.
Yeah.
You really do have to go back to the beginning with Watts, like his childhood, to understand him, you know?
Okay, so let's unpack that. His early life, it was definitely troubled. I mean, his parents divorced when he was just a toddler, and then his relationship with his stepdad, strained, to say the least. There are even reports calling him a mama's boy. You got to think that that impacted his development, right?
Oh, absolutely. That early instability, it can really leave a mark. And those early experiences, it makes you think about how they might have contributed to his insecurities, maybe even the violence later on.
And then there's this super eerie detail.
Okay.
As a kid, Watts was obsessed with hunting and skinning rabbits.
Oh, wow.
With his grandfather. I mean, on the surface, hunting, it's whatever.
Yeah.
But you got to wonder if being exposed to death and violence that young desensitized him somehow,
That is a great point. It's like foreshadowing. You have to think those early experiences played a role.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then, okay, at age 8, Watts gets severe meningitis. Some experts believe it could have caused brain damage, led to like a personality shift. He got more introverted, started having violent dreams.
Oh, wow.
And this is weird. He gets fixated on this idea of freeing the spirits of women with, quote, evil eyes.
The meningitis, that's a big turning point. We can't definitively say it caused his violence, but the timing. It's like his personality changes and these weird fixations pop up.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if the illness just made things worse,
Totally. Like what's nature, what's nurture, right?
Right.
Tragically, his fantasies didn't stay in his head. At 15, he brutally attacked a 26-year-old woman. He was delivering newspapers.
Oh, my God.
It's crazy.
This first attack, it's just chilling because it starts this pattern that continues, right?
Yeah.
And that much violence at 15, it's super alarming.
And what's worse, he just goes about his day.
Oh, come on.
Nothing happened.
That lack of remorse is scary.
It really is.
It's like he's totally disconnected from the consequences of his actions.
Exactly. And of course, they did a psych evaluation, mild intellectual disability, but more importantly, they found zero remorse.
Wow.
And a passive-aggressive orientation to life, quote unquote.
That passive-aggressive thing is important.
Yeah.
In Watts' case, it seemed like simmering resentment towards people, especially women, and all that bottled up anger, it probably contributed to the violence.
Okay.
And then he tells the psychiatrist that he feels, quote, better after having violent dreams.
Yeah,
It's like disturbing, right?
Oh, it's totally disturbing.
A glimpse into his mind. It's like violence is a coping mechanism, a way to control things.
And sadly, despite this, he's released on his 16th birthday.
16.
Tries to get back to normal. Attends Lane College for a bit. He struggles academically, but excels in athletics, particularly football and boxing.
Oh, interesting. So he found an outlet, maybe?
You'd think, right.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough. He ends up getting expelled for stalking and assaulting women.
Oh, no.
There were even rumors, though never proven, connecting him to the unsolved murder of a female student.
That's when things really escalate.
Yeah.
And it just gets scarier from there.
And that brings us to 1974. Watts is 20 years old.
Yeah.
That's when the real terror begins.
Okay.
Multiple states, tons of attacks, all targeting women.
His MO was consistent, though. Kidnap, torture, and then kill.
Yeah.
Strangulation, stabbing, drowning.
It's awful.
And it's mainly young, slender, attractive white women.
Yeah.
Suggests a type he was drawn to.
Definitely a pattern.
Yeah, but the why, that's still a mystery.
Makes him even more complex.
Exactly. And the fact that he crossed state lines.
Right.
Premeditation. This wasn't random.
He knew what he was doing.
He was searching out victims, exploiting their vulnerability. And honestly, that makes him even scarier.
It's terrifying how he went undetected for so long. I mean, we talked about his early life, how his crimes escalated, but how did he evade capture like years with so many victims?
It baffled investigators for sure. One thing, he didn't have a sexual component to his crimes.
Okay.
A lot of serial killers, that's their thing, leaves DNA.
Right.
Not Watts.
So, like, he was ahead of the curve.
Kinda, yeah. No sexual motive, harder to profile him.
Hmm.
Investigators are looking for those traditional patterns, connections.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't fit.
It's creepy. Okay, let's look at a case that really shows his brutality, this pattern of targeting women in their homes. 1974, Lenore Nizaki, attacked in her own apartment.
That one's disturbing, the deception. He knocks on her door, uses one of his siblings' names.
Oh, wow.
Pretends he's looking for someone.
So premeditated.
Totally. He wasn't just strong-arming people, he was manipulative.
Exploiting their trust.
Exactly. And then, days later, another horrible crime. Gloria Steele, a student at Western Michigan University, murdered.
That one was brutal. Crushed windpipe, stabbed multiple times, just pure rage.
And there was an eyewitness, Diane Williams. She barely escaped.
Oh my God.
She saw Watts at her apartment complex right before Steele was killed.
It's amazing she survived. Her testimony must have been key.
Absolutely. Williams gives the investigators their first real lead. Watts gets arrested, charged with assault and battery.
Did they know about the murder then?
I don't think so, but either way, the sentence is insane. 1 year.
1 year. He attacked 2 women.
I know, right? It shows how much the system was failing back then.
And it let him continue, didn't it?
Sadly, yeah. Late 1970s, he's linked to all these murders in Detroit. He even gets a nickname, the Sunday Morning Slasher.
That's scary. Why that name?
He always attacked on Sunday mornings like 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Women were terrified to leave their homes.
It's like something out of a horror movie.
Right, and the police are trying to connect the dots. There are all these unsolved cases that look like him, but no solid proof.
He just blended in, had this normal life, but then...
Totally. It's like he had these separate lives, the charming guy and then this monster.
And then in 1980, there's a break in the case.
Yes.
Investigators find a dictionary.
Oh, yeah. Belonged to Rebecca Huff, a grad student. It was in Watts' car. It had, get this, Rebecca's his lover carved into it.
Oh, come on.
They couldn't convict him for murder with that, but it puts him on the map.
It's crazy how a little thing like that...
I know, right? It proves how important the details are.
Totally.
Sometimes the tiniest clue
Yeah.
can break a case wide open.
But even then, he moves to Texas and just keeps going. Like, it's like he got more confident or something.
Texas, 1981, a whole new chapter. He kind of disappears into the city, works for an oil company. Normal guy.
Except he's not at all.
Right, and in Texas, it gets worse. More attacks, more violence.
Worse than before.
Yeah, even more brutal, depraved, and random. He'd attack women in their homes, on the street.
So scary. No way to predict it.
It was a nightmare for the police.
Let's talk about some of the Texas cases, the ones he confessed to. It's hard to hear, but we need to understand.
One that's particularly bad, Linda Tilley, a student at UT.
Okay.
Watts says he follows her home, attacks her, holds her underwater in her apartment complex's pool
Ugh.
until she drowns.
It's just awful. No remorse. It's like he's talking about the weather.
A week later, he kills Elizabeth Montgomery, stabs her to death in her apartment. And then there's Susan Wolf, attacked walking home from the store.
Just living her life. It could have been anyone.
Exactly. Wrong place, wrong time. Watts confessed to killing Phyllis Tam, too, while she was jogging, choked her, then hung her body from a tree with a strap.
It's just senseless. What would drive someone to do that?
No one really knows. It's the big question.
And the terror doesn't stop. Margaret Fossey, Elena Samander, Emily Lacroix, Anna Ledette, Yolanda Garcia, Carrie Jefferson, Suzanne Searles, Michelle Madej. He admitted to all of them.
It's a lot, and those are just the ones we know about.
Right.
He could be one of the most prolific serial killers ever.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But at least it ended. May 1982, Watts is finally arrested. He attacked Melinda Aguilar and Lori Lister in their Houston apartment.
Aguilar, she was amazing. She was tied up, hurt, but she got away and called the cops.
She's a hero.
Totally. Saved her own life and stopped him. But then things get controversial.
How so?
They offered him a plea deal.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Full confession, he leads them to some of the bodies, and he gets immunity.
Immunity. So he gets away with murder.
Basically. He gets charged with burglary with intent to murder, gets 60 years.
But he can't be tried for any of the murders.
Oh.
People must have been furious.
They were. They said justice wasn't served, that he was getting off easy, that it devalued the victims' lives.
I get it. Why would they make that deal?
They said it was the only way to make sure he'd be locked up. And they hoped the confessions would bring closure to the families.
That's tough. wanting to punish him, but also needing to stop him.
Right. And is it ever okay to negotiate with a serial killer?
And then there are all the murders he hinted at, but never gave details about.
80 women, she said.
80.
But he wouldn't say more.
So many families will never know what happened.
It's heartbreaking. And for the families of the ones he did confess to that deal,
Yeah.
it felt like a betrayal, like their loved ones didn't matter.
It's just awful.
Yeah.
So he gets this plea deal, basically a slap on the wrist. But you mentioned a legal technicality.
Yeah, it's crazy. Because of some weirdness in Texas law, like what counts as a deadly weapon, Watts could get out early after just 16 years.
16 years. For like maybe dozens of murders.
I know. The public was furious. The thought of this guy walking free. Terrifying.
Yeah.
But this is where things change. It becomes about the system that almost let him go and the people who stopped it.
Okay, so it's a race against time now.
Exactly. And Michigan Attorney General Mike Cox, he steps up. He knew how dangerous this was. He goes public, asking for anyone with info on Watts to come forward.
Bold move.
It was, especially focusing on cases outside Texas where the deal wouldn't protect Watts.
So they're hoping someone remembers something after all this time. Did it work?
It did. A guy named Joseph Foy calls the cops.
Wow.
He'd seen the murder of Helen Dutcher in Michigan back in 1979.
So many years ago.
Right. And he knew it was Watts. He testified, gave all these details about the attack, how Watts looked, everything.
That's powerful after all that time.
It was huge. It was enough to put Watts on trial in Michigan.
Where he had no immunity.
Exactly. 2004, he's convicted of Helen Dutcher's murder. Life in prison.
Finally.
And it doesn't stop there.
Really?
The Michigan authorities, they go back even further. They decided to go after Watts for Gloria Steele's murder, the one from 74.
The one with the eyewitness. Wow.
They felt like they had a good chance with Diane Williams' testimony.
And did they?
2007, Watts is found guilty. Another life sentence.
He was never getting out.
Nope. Those convictions made sure of that.
It's a win, but it's bittersweet. Some families got some closure, but there are so many others who will never know.
That's the sad truth. Watts died in prison that same year, 2007. Prostate cancer. He took all his secrets with him.
It's like the end of a horror movie, but it really happened.
It did, and it leaves you thinking, how many other Carl Watts are out there, just blending in?
It's a scary thought.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we can ever really understand this kind of evil.
It's tough. We can look at risk factors, profiles, but predicting who will become a monster, it's almost impossible.
Well, this has been a heavy one. Thanks for sticking with us.
Of course.
It's disturbing to look at the darkness in the world. But cases like this also show the strength of people fighting for justice.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, even when faced with evil, there's always hope, and the power of one voice can make all the difference.